Hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here on the Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. I wonder, do you ever have a day where you wake up and you just think, there's no way that God could use me today? Maybe you feel off, maybe your emotions are all over the place, maybe you're struggling with something at work, in a relationship at home, and you have all these people that are counting on you, whether it's your kids, if you're a mom at home, whether it's people at work or people in school, on your team, whatever it is, and they're counting on you, but you think, I just got nothing to offer today. I got nothing, I'm at my end. I have those days sometimes. I wake up and I just think, how could God possibly use me today? We might call those days, according to Scripture, and I'll show you this in a moment, not about you days. Sometimes we have not about you days. See, some days we're tempted to think, you know what, I bring a lot to the table. I'm pretty talented. I'm pretty good at what I do. Whether we're a mom or a businessman or an athlete or a student or whatever, you know what, I deserve what's coming to me. But I'm thankful for those not about you days because they remind me of what's really important. They remind me of how God works and how God desires to work in me, but also through me. I want to bring you to a familiar passage in the book of 2 Corinthians. It's chapter 4, and it's written by the Apostle Paul. And every time I read this, it's a familiar text. We've probably even talked about it on the Cornerstone Connection before. We've done over 300 of these now, so I can't remember, to be honest. But this is a passage that always checks me in my spirit and reminds me, Andy, it's not about you. Okay, listen to this. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 and following. Paul writes, "For what we preach is not ourselves." You ever feel like you got to preach yourself in order for somebody to take you seriously? As Christians, we don't preach ourselves. We don't preach and ask people to believe us based on who we are. We ask people to believe us based on who God is through us, okay? So Paul writes, "For what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake." There's a big difference between preaching ourselves and preaching ourselves as servants for Jesus' sake. You see it? So Paul continues. He says, "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of the darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the grace of Christ." The things that come out of us, the things that people see, those things that are redemptive, those things that are part of God's plan, they reflect the light that God has put in us. What comes out of us as Christians ought to reflect what God has put in us. And so Paul says this. He says, "We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us." Friends, you and I are called to represent Jesus to the world around us. We're called to be a light, to be salt and light in a dark world, in a world that in many ways is struggling and reeling with the effects of sin. You and I are called to make a difference there, but remember, it's not about you. Remember, it's not about me. Remember, we're just jars of clay. And, a jar of clay in the first century was as common as the green grass outside here in Wisconsin right now. It was normal, nothing, not a big deal kind of occurrence. But there it was. Church, we're a jar of clay, but what do jars do? They hold something. We hold a great treasure. We hold the gospel of Jesus Christ. We hold the truth that though we have fallen short of God's glory, that we have sinned, God has met us in our need, and He's forgiven us as we put our faith in Jesus. And we hold that gospel, that treasure, out to the world around us. If today you're feeling like you just don't have it, like you just can't cope, you just can't do anything you think that is of lasting value, remember, it's not about you. It's not about me. But it's about the treasure we hold. We're just jars. He's the treasure.